No doubting the big event for European markets next week, but it's not in Europe. It's the US Fed's policy decision on Wednesday, with markets in turmoil over speculation about an end to its bond buying. CMC Markets analyst Michael Hewson says investors just want some reassurance.
I think, if anything, the market's looking for Mr. Bernanke to hold its hand and say, look, we're not going to pare back our quantitative easing programme. We're going to adjust it according to the economic data, and we're going to remain accommodative. And I really don't see that he's going to say anything that much different.
Here in Europe, the week kicks off with the G8 summit in Northern Ireland. Security tight for the event, but protests already taking place in London and around the country. Syria likely to top the agenda after the White House said it was ready to start arming the rebels. Keep an eye on Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe too. He's due to hold talks with Angela Merkel during the summit and with British counterpart David Cameron later in the week. The Japanese leader, under pressure to prove his aggressive economic stimulus measures are still working. US President Barack Obama also due for talks with Merkel later in the week in Berlin. Meanwhile, eurozone finance ministers gather in Luxembourg on Thursday. Germany expected to come under heavy pressure to relent on its opposition to a cross-border bank resolution mechanism. That now the main obstacle to a banking union deal, but Berlin isn't expected to budge before September's general election. Turkey still the other big story, with no sign of an end to the unrest there. Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan sending mixed messages regarding whether he plans to crack down on the protesters or relent. The unrest also playing into a difficult policy decision for the Turkish Central Bank. Massive capital outflows and a tumbling lira making any repeat of last month's rate cut highly unlikely. Greece looking like a potential flashpoint again too. Prime Minister Antonis Samaras facing a revolt within the ruling coalition over his abrupt closure of the state broadcaster. Any collapse of the government certain to tip Greece back into crisis. Elsewhere, look out for bond sales from Spain, France and Germany. France probably the most closely watched, with Paris continuing to resist pressure for faster structural reforms. Meanwhile, Spain's bond sale on Thursday comes 48 hours after the IMF publishes its latest report on the country. Spanish yields creeping up again, but with fundraising for the year ahead of schedule, analysts say Madrid isn't under too much pressure just yet. On the data front, watch out for Germany's latest ZEW index on Tuesday. Current conditions and economic sentiment both seen picking up in June. On Thursday, we'll get flash PMIs and consumer confidence for the eurozone. All PMIs seen heading higher, but expected to remain well below the 50 point. That determines contraction from expansion. And outside the eurozone, watch out for inflation and retail sales numbers from the UK. Inflation seen running at a similar pace to last month, while retail sales are expected to add to the spate of encouraging signals coming out of Britain. Retailers, the ones to watch on the earnings calendar too. H&M reporting Q1 figures, and the world's number 2 fashion retailer isn't expected to sound too confident. The Swedish firm said earlier this week that the economic downturn in Europe continues to weigh on sales. Also next week, Boeing and Airbus resume hostilities as the Paris Air Show kicks off. Airbus stealing the show today with the first flight of its latest big jet, the A350. Boeing now expected to set out its next moves and stay with Reuters for all the big name interviews from Paris during the week. That's a look ahead to next week's market moving events. I'm Jamie McGeever. This is Reuters.